So stay tuned as we dive into his incredible journey from record breaking leadership to faith driven entrepreneurship. So, with that, Steve, welcome to the show. And I'm really, really honored to have you with us.
Thank you, Sana. It's great to be here.
Brilliant, brilliant. Steve, let's start with your story, your journey. It's really, really inspiring from launching a business at 15 to leading Fortune 100 teams. I mean, that is super incredible. So, if you can share a glimpse of that, and also what key mindset shift do you think entrepreneurs need to adopt to build teams that should be scaled?
Yeah. Yeah. So, real quick on my story, right? So my first job was commercial salmon fishing in Alaska. So we're out there on the ocean. I was 14 years old, probably 95 pounds, trying to pull in all this fish. And I worked about 100 plus hours a week for a month. And I got my paycheck at the end of that month. And I mean, it was, I don't know, 2 or 3 thousand bucks, which for a 14-year-old kid was all the money in the world. But
Oh, yeah.
I, Sana, I did the math and I'm like, we caught hundreds of thousands of pounds of salmon. And I know how much the price of salmon is. Someone got a lot of money here and it wasn't me. And I figured out it was the owner, the business owner. And I thought, man, I want to be the business owner. And so started my first company when I was 15, asphalt maintenance company. I ran all through high school and college, paid my way through high school and college with that, and then entered the, financial services industry, traded in the dirty outdoor work clothes for a suit and tie, which I no longer am wearing. But I did that for 17 years at New York Life Insurance Company. I was a financial advisor for 5 years and then moved into leadership where I led, built teams. I've interviewed thousands and thousands of candidates, hired hundreds of people in my career. And what I found was that after 17 years of that, I was just a really highly paid employee of their business, not my business. And, it was really which is great, right? Most people, I'll tell you, Sana, most people to have the mindset to go be a business owner, they probably don't. They should be the best employee, possibly even the best entrepreneur that they can be. But I knew that God had gifted me with the ability to be an entrepreneur from an early age. And I learned a lot in that role, leading teams for other companies, for another company. But ultimately, I was 37 years old, and my wife and I, through prayer, said, now's the time. Like I didn't want to become 60 years old and look back and say, I wish I would have. And so we made that change. And I will tell you, you asked me, what is the mindset that someone needs to have? And you talked about faith driven, right? Like you got to have faith, because anybody who looks at what I've done and had to do over the last 19 months, from selling our beautiful dream lakefront house and all our nice cars and cashing out my retirement and moving into a rental and buying 15-year-old car, like no one would ever do that. Like that doesn't make sense. I haven't got a paycheck for 20 months and I've just been draining savings and then investing hundreds of thousands of dollars more into the business, right? No one would do that. That doesn't make sense unless your mindset shift is that I have faith. And I have faith that I'm supposed to do this. So to answer your question, that's like the number one mindset that you would need to have.
I believe in that. And a few questions I have in my mind. So, I mean, there has been a spark within you right from childhood for entrepreneurship. Secondly, you were in, financial planning is not an easy cup of tea. It's no cup of tea. It's a highly stressful job.
Yeah.
And then you decided to go for entrepreneurship. For 20 months, you didn't have any paycheck. So that's a huge risk. And that makes me think, Steve, is entrepreneurship for everyone? Should everyone try it out once in their life, or there has to be a practical calculation of risks, rewards, circumstances, resources, capability, and whatnot to think about it?
Yeah. No, it is not for everyone. It has to be a calling. And I would say the biggest thing is knowing, a couple things. Knowing your gifting, like what gifts has God given you that you can operate in? Because an entrepreneur, although they have to wear a lot of hats, they're going to be best served if they do their business, they do their work within something that allows them to spend the majority of their time within their giftings. And then, to your point of growing and scaling teams, figure out a way to bring other people into the company to do things within their giftings that complement what you do. The second thing is they have to have a really big why. So for me, my life mission and my statement is that I am a bold, encouraging, and generous follower of Jesus Christ. So boldness, encouragement, and generosity are three of my giftings who will help fund billions of dollars to grow God's kingdom by leading others to live radically generous lives. And so I've had that spoken over me. I have that like tattooed on my heart, knowing that that's who I am and that's my calling. And really, that was the driving force behind I had to leave because I couldn't do that inside of someone else's company any longer. It provided a great foundation to where I could do all the things that I just described that it takes to start a company. So I have that knowledge and that conviction. So someone needs to go into entrepreneurship. They have to know what that is, that calling, that big why, that purpose. And that has to align with entrepreneurship. That calling and purpose could align within working in someone else's company, and such, they should stay doing that. But if it can only be achieved by working, inside of building your own company, then that's going to provide the power and conviction behind doing that.
Beautifully put, Steve. Beautifully. Brilliant. Now let's go back to our topic. Of course, I mean, you emphasize creating a culture of passion, accountability, and learning as well. Can you give us any real example where this culture actually saved a business or accelerated its growth? Because somewhere in all this hustle of profit and numbers and output and sales and whatnot, the soft values or aspects of workplace culture, team spirit, how well oiled your team is, they all kind of get lost
Yeah.
or get over.
Yeah. I think our clients might define or accuse us of being well oiled and have a good process, but I don't think any of our employees would. We're still very startup-y. Like people, their hat changes often. They're called to do things outside of their job description. They're called to learn new industries and terminology. And, that aligns with our values, right? So our values are excellence, faith, family, generosity, and growth. So when we bring someone in, Sana, we are very clear about our values and we spend a lot of time asking and talking about how the person aligns with the values. And so that value of excellence, right? We're not perfect, but we're trying to get better every day. And growth, right? This company was like, I didn't leave to start a lifestyle company. This is $1 billion company in the making. That's just early. And so that people and the person we have to each individually become and the organization that we have to become is going to continue to evolve and require growth. And so I'll tell you, maybe not a great example, probably the opposite example of what you're asking, but when we founded our company in November of 2023, we had a very different product and offering, a very different ideal client profile that we served. And so I recruited and built a team. We got as large as 48 people on our team serving that mission. And after a year of doing everything that my partner and I could possibly do to make that business model profitable and viable, we still never made a profit. And I was, the Perry household was the private equity firm behind funding our company, and that couldn't go on much longer. And so we had to make a strategic shift. And it wasn't just that we're going to start selling something else and serving a different customer. Because we're so mission aligned, we actually had to change the mission of the company and the vision of the company to align with the new direction that to be a viable company and to fulfill our values, we had to become. In that, Sana, we allowed most people to stay with the company. Some roles just like it didn't exist in the new model. So we very generously and graciously, as a non-profitable startup, paid severance packages to people that actually weren't even employees. They were contractors, but we gave them severance and because it was aligned with our values. But everyone that we could, we retrained and repurposed their role to align with the new direction of the company. In that, very quickly, some of them were like, I don't want to do this. This is not what I want to do. And so we have we have significantly turned over our team to where, we've got 30 people on our team, but probably only 15 of them are from the original company. So that's an example of things we've had to do as a company where we've stayed true to our values as a company. Those are the things that haven't changed, but what had to be done and how we manage that to get to the point where we are today.
That is such a great example. And it strengthens the why and the value so much, not only within the team, but within the leadership as well. Because now all of them are aligned together towards the vision or the mission. And this is so overlooked sometimes, because on the surface level everything may look okay, or maybe there's some kind of negative impact, and altogether, it starts with who is responsible for this, or there's a blame game, and then a lot of to and fro. So with that, I also want to bring in about accountability, Steve. I have experienced this personally in many workplaces, that people struggle with accountability in particular. It's like, passing the blame, and that kind of creates a huge dent in the team spirit. And that affects the output as well to a huge extent. So, how do you ensure that accountability is embraced rather than resisted?
Very poorly for about the first 8 to 10 months of our company. I did not do good with it. Like,
That's an answer.
yeah, it was not great. And what I thought was being nice by saying, just get your job done, right? And we need to do about this was not nice because people didn't know what was expected of them. And inevitably, it led to not having the bottom line reflect a profitable, growing, excellent company. And so inevitably, I, as a leader, am disappointed in the activities and the results, but I don't have anywhere to look other than myself because I wasn't clear with this is what's expected. And Sana, that's one of the hardest things of being in a startup. When you're creating something new, you don't know what inputs equal the outputs that you want. You're guessing. And so, and it's either going to be too high of an expectation or it's going to be too low of an expectation. And so I was so hesitant for so long as a leader to do that. And it took me well over a year to get to the point where it was like, these are the metrics that are required every day. And certain areas of our company had expectations implemented sooner than later. And guess which areas of our company thrived, right? The ones that had very clear expectations that were communicated in advance when we hired the person and communicated consistently when we were having performance conversations with them. So there wasn't the ability to pass blame in those areas. In other areas where the assignment was, get your job done, well, there wasn't success there until we finally aligned under, hey, this is what's required to be successful. We think, subject to change, but as long as you do this, you get to keep your job. And then they're clear that they need to do these things, and I'm clear that that like I may be wrong on the number, but at least I know someone's doing what I've asked them to do, and if we need to change the number, then we'll get it right. So one last thing on that, like org chart, right? Who reports to who? Well, initially I hired everybody, so they reported to me, but as a CEO, like that doesn't work. And I was hesitant because I wanted to be nice. I wanted to say, hey, you don't have to report to anyone. I don't want this hierarchy and this over heavy-handed like leadership structure. Well, then that wasn't clear because people didn't know who to be accountable to. And so again, it wasn't until I said, all right, this person owns this department, you report to them, you report to them, you report to them. This person owns this, you're responsible for these metrics. Your job is to make sure your team gets these metrics. Wasn't until I did that we finally started seeing progression and results as well. And so those are stories of accountability, again, like negative examples that I didn't have in place as this founder that we have now put in, and my goodness, they work.
Wow, it's a lot of learning, Steve. I absolutely appreciate your humility, because as a CEO, as a leader, it really means a lot that, you're accepting your mistake and you are learning from that, and then you're executing, you're implementing it. And that kind of sets such a good example for the people who are working with you or reporting to you, and then the people who are reporting to them as well, because, it's a ripple effect. And secondly, Steve, you're absolutely right. Sometimes and this happens with a lot of early stage entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, that they handle everything together. They want everyone to report to themselves, just because they don't want to they want to create a distinction that this is not a typical corporate setup. But I think delegation is such an important part of a good leader, because that's where the difference lies between doing a job and then running a business.
Mm-hmm.
That you are not doing everything, you are running a business. So you know strategically
Mm-hmm.
where you have a role to play. And then you are actually trusting people, managers, or anyone
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who is also handling the team. And you know that the job is getting done.
Yeah.
That's a really good point you made, Steve. I
Thank you.
really appreciate that. And also coming to humility, I think faith has given you that humility. So, what would you say? How important is faith driven leadership to have that humility, vulnerability, yet that strength
Yeah.
to, kind of accept your mistakes, but then also help others to be aligned?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story from my employee days that have transitioned into the entrepreneurial days. So, when I was running my first office, it was a couple months after my 30th birthday, and I was given an office of 40 people to lead. And we prayed every morning and we said, Lord, please help us to be so successful in this company and in this office that we can't help but point to you as the source for our success. And at the end of that year, our little office in West Texas, won, competed against 115 offices all across the United States. And there's 15 trophies in 15 different areas that you can win. We won 8 of the 15 trophies. We won more than half of the trophies that year, which was a record. 170-year-old company, no one had ever won that many before. We broke the record. So it was like, wow, Lord, like you really showed off. Like we can't take the credit for that. The problem was, Sana, next year we had to compete against those numbers again. And we kept the prayer the same. And every morning in staff meeting, we prayed, Lord, help us be so successful that we can't help but point to you as the source of success. Knowing we're competing against a record year, the next year we won 9 of the 15 trophies. In back-to-back years, we broke our own record. And so what that said to me was like the power of prayer and the acknowledgement that all of the success is coming from the gifts that God has given us and from Him. I can't take credit for it. And so, if we said we wanted to win a couple trophies and we wanted to have 10% growth, we could probably make a case for how we did that. But I didn't leave a $900,000 a year job to grow at 10% and win a couple trophies. And so from the very beginning, we have led with prayer and said, Lord, help us to be so successful. Like we want your plan. We want your numbers. We want God-given numbers and God-given success. So we can't take any of the credit. We have to give credit to God on it. And so the fact that we're still in business and that we've been able to do all these things and grow and shrink and repurpose and have the talent level of people that we have in our organization is nothing short of a miracle. And so giving that credit to God is like, here's all the mistakes I made, but God still let it work. Like it just kind of puts me in a position where I would feel foolish to take any of the credit.
Beautiful. It's beautiful, Steve. Really inspiring. And just, for our listeners to take something, of course, there's so many golden nuggets here, but just as a part of the conversation we are having. So, what do you think is, or maybe are, the biggest mistakes you see leaders make when trying to hire for growth? And how do you advise they can avoid them?
I would say a couple things. One of the things is that a lot of firms are hiring based on the friends and family plan. So they're, whoever they get referred in, they're hiring them. And
Yeah.
it seems amazing because someone knows them and is vouching for them and it's free. They don't have to pay an expensive firm like us. We're expensive. But what we find over and over and over again is that people's flaws or red flags or yellow flags in the interview process are overlooked because someone referred them in. And so not only that, they hire someone they shouldn't have. And number two, they keep them longer than they should have because of that relationship. And so whatever it saved them and not having a recruiting firm find that person for them, it cost them many, 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 many more times that because of them not getting the right person and the cost of replacing them. Whereas, when they hire us, they put us through the ringer. Anyone we send them, like they're making sure that is the right person because they got to write a fat check when they hire that person. But that's a self-fulfilling prophecy that says they're by default going to get a significantly better candidate when they work with somebody like us.
Yeah. That's such a valid point. Such a valid point. Brilliant. So, see, before we wrap up this conversation, if our listeners would like to connect with you,
Yeah.
what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so if they're hiring anybody, I got a free gift. Go to hirethewell.com and they can download the top 10 interview questions that they can ask to make sure they get the right hire every time. And so free download on there, and then it redirects to our website so you can learn more about us. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I post way too much, so if you don't like reading posts, don't follow me. But if you do, and any of this has resonated with you, this is literally just the stuff I say on LinkedIn all the time. So happy to connect with you on that. Steve Perry.
Beautiful. I'll make sure to have all the links included in the show notes. And Steve, this was really, really such an impactful and meaningful conversation. Huge thank you to you for sharing your wisdom on team building, leadership, and life. So thank you once again.
Yeah, my
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you, Simon.